Let's see here. So we're gonna pick up in chapter 4 of Esther, but let's get a running start. So last time we had Haman upset at Mordecai for not bowing, and so rather than killing Mordecai, he goes on and wants to kill the entire Jewish population, and so he sets out an edict, and it says basically that there's going to be a 1 day free for all on Jews. And so that every person in the 127 provinces, they all get 1 day to kill as many Jews as they can. And whoever they kill, they get to keep their stuff. And so it's making it rather, that way they don't have to send armies out and stuff like that. That way they can do it speedily. So it says, whoever's going to do it, whichever one you kill, that you get to keep all their stuff to encourage all the people to do that. And so I set it out, and everyone was getting everyone got a copy of it, and then it says, and the king and Haman sat down to drink, and the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. And that's where it leaves us on that at the end of chapter 3. And so now we have in chapter 4 Mordecai. When Mordecai learned that all that he had done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. So notice here that Mordecai is the first to learn of the edict. It's sent out to everybody, but we have Mordecai learning of it first. And he's the stereotypical, so he embodies all of the Jewish population. And so here he has, and he starts to he's identifying with all the people, and I've mentioned it before, and I think Mordecai is functioning as a God figure here, because here, so remember that God isn't mentioned in Esther, so here he is. You can see God acting in the person of Mordecai. He's tearing his clothes, putting on sackcloth and ashes, and it's just a sign of mourning, deep frustration, and it's. Give me a second, I'll get to that part. But here you can see a little bit of God in there, because why would they do that? You know, typically it's associated with turning away divine wrath. And so we can get a little bit in there. Esther 4, the text is once again leaves open the possibility of interpreting these actions as entreaties to their God, without in any way confirming that interpretation. So you have the author is almost he's almost gone through with a black marker and like redacted every instance of God in here, but for a purpose. And so Mordecai goes up to the entrance of the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth and ashes. If you're going to go and see the king, you have to be happy. None of this mourning and bringing the king down. He can do that all on his own. And so they're not going to allow anyone in there. And so what you see here is we're going to get a distinction here between Mordecai and Esther. And this is kind of setting up a dichotomy here, because the king's command is that nobody mourn in his presence, even though he's just sent out a very troublesome thing. Here's Mordecai, all the Jews, they're all in sackcloth and ashes, but Esther's not. In chapter or verse 3, we get just a why he's doing all of this. In verse 4, when Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her, the queen was deeply distressed. She sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. So she has to be told of this. So you can see her, she's not quite identifying any longer with her people. You know, all the Jews are putting on sackcloth and ashes, and they're lamenting and uh, doing all those things. But she has to be told about the fact that her people have just been condemned to die.
That must have put a great sense of separation in her identity.
Exactly. So you can see she's almost identifying more with with royalty, with the Persians than she is with her people, and it's not quite ready to give put that up there, but you can sort of see it, and she laments, and she's deeply distressed, but not about what Mordecai is deeply distressed about. See, if you look in here, it says she's deeply distressed, but she doesn't say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do that too." She sends clothes to Mordecai. She's stop that. You know, if you do this, you're going to get killed. So
The scales were tipped.
right, yeah, she doesn't. She's more concerned about Mordecai lamenting rather than what he is lamenting. So she's like, please just take this off. And there's multiple reasons as to why. Is it because she's depressed because Mordecai is so upset, or is she upset by Mordecai approaching the king's gate in an illegal attire? Or is she worried for his well-being, or is she concerned to maintain the law? Or she might be concerned with the fact that her lamenting and her being so close with him that it might get out that she's a Jew.
Well, thinking like a woman as I do, I would say all of the above.
Well, yes, but it's doing it for a purpose. Again, you said it just a second ago. It's setting that distance between the Jews and Esther right now, because she's going to have to make a decision whether or not she wants to come in and help them.
Tough spot to be in.
Really, exactly. Yeah, and I don't even know that the text is setting her up if she's meaning to do this, but all of a sudden her world has just changed, and then this happens, and so she's caught up in earthly things.
You nailed it, because I was just thinking for some, not for everybody, but for some people, when they start getting a great deal of money, well, let's say lottery winners,
Mm-hmm.
along with that comes the fear of then losing it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and so she doesn't want to jeopardize that. But notice another thing here is there's even more distance between her, not just the clothes, but on a literal level, she now has intermediaries. She has, she's not hearing this straight from Mordecai. Someone is coming and telling her. The eunuchs actually function that in that role in literature, because they're kind of in between people. They're neither really male nor female, because because they used to be male, but they no longer have the tackle, and so they function in this kind of uh, in between world. They were in charge of the harem, because you know they wouldn't uh, they wouldn't try to sleep with the king's wives.
Wouldn't pursue them.
Exactly. And even if you could, nothing, there wouldn't be any illegitimate children coming out of that. And so they're kind of this says they're the guards of the threshold. And so you can even put them here if you kind of take that on another level here is kind of the mouthpieces for God, kind of like the prophets,
Uh-huh.
because here you have uh, Esther, who I'd say represents the Jews, but not yet, and then Mordecai, who's the God figure, and right now they're going to be talking between intermediaries.
Mm.
Yeah, never that full communication until all of a sudden and again the author's doing that on purpose to make it a more interesting story, because now you have to wait for these things to happen, and it kind of slows down the action.
So do you think, and this is just how my brain works, that perhaps along with all the position change, that the people that she is now around the most, in a sense, are kind of like her current family, which would make it more difficult also?
Well, yes, I mean
Or
she's
her community, I'll put it that way.
right, and yes, uh, on that level, yes, it's absolutely, she's got a new circle of friends she's hanging out with, because
Yeah,
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 especially because her her uncle told her not to reveal herself, so she can't. So she's hanging around zero Jewish people
yeah.
because they would know.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's an entirely new family circle of friends, however you want to label that. But yeah,
yeah,
and they're obviously having an influence on her because she's now so far removed that where once she could communicate with Mordecai face to face, now all of a sudden she can't.
yeah.
Yeah, due to that distance. And then in verse 5, Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why. Hathach went out to Mordecai in an open square of the city in the front of the king's gates, and Mordecai told him all that happened to him, and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay to the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. So, again, you have this intermediary now, and notice here that Mordecai knows everything. You also have the uh, the the play here between the knowledge of Mordecai and the ignorance of Esther. I mean, she has to be telling. She's like, What are you on about? Why are you coming in here in these clothes? Put on normal clothes." And then he doesn't. He refuses to. Then she's like, Why is he so upset?
What is his problem?
Exactly. What is he doing? Why won't he be normal? And so to learn what it is and why. And so he goes out, and then Haman tells him what's going on, and he says, "This is Mordecai has the knowledge of everything. He knows the exact sum of money." And Bill Creasy puts the amount, because this is written in talents. It was what, 100,000 talents, 10,000 talents, which, if you convert it to weight, is 375 tons of silver.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is how he's like, look, he's trying to this is going to happen because he's promised to pay it out of his own pocket for the destruction of the Jews. And he says, and
Mm.
here's the decree. This is going to happen. And he's trying to convince her, um, trying to do all these, trying to link it into the larger narrative here. The author is, because he's using some of the same words here. He says to show. He says that he might show it to Esther, to explain it to her, and command her to show it. This is the king's aim in chapter 1, when he wants to show his wife to the people. Then to reveal the public knowledge of one's Jewishness has to be revealed in the book of Esther, and then to command. This is the Mordecai and Esther's relationship has been that of commandment and obedience. So now here you have this. It's really putting Esther in that bind. Remember, I just said that that distance between them. He's putting her in this pickle, because now it's set up the king has done all these things before, and now Mordecai's telling her to do all these things. So she's pulled between two realms, and that's on purpose. She has to choose, because you can't obey both.
It's kind of like being a parent.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, it's being a parent. It's the world or God.
Yeah.
You can't always do both. There comes a time when you have to pick a side, and not picking God, or not picking is picking.
Yes.
Like we tell the girls,
Yeah.
if you not making a decision is making a decision.
Because they decided to not make a decision.
Exactly. And so this is what they're setting it up to on purpose, so that she has to decide whether she wants to be Persian or that she wants to be Jewish. And it's interesting here is when Mordecai talked about all that had happened to him. Again, in the larger sense here, he's not talking about just Mordecai. He's talking about all the people here. He is self-identifying here as the Jewish people, because it's not just Mordecai that's about to die, it's everyone. It's kind of like when Jesus says to Saul, 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 why do you persecute me? He's identifying everyone, even though Saul's persecution was against very specific people. All right, and then verse 10 said, and then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law, to be put to death, except when the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter, so that he may live. But as for me, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. On a purely historical level, one can't just come up to the king, just like you just can't walk up to the president. You have to be invited to it. If not, he doesn't know if you're trying to kill him or what.
Well, I'm sure then, as in now, there's a safety issue.
And that's exactly what it is. And Bill Creasy, he was saying, just looking through all the first and second kings, about how many kings died because they didn't have such protection. They go in there and people kill them all the time.
Took them a while to learn, didn't it?
Exactly. So you have these protections here, and you have to live by them, that you can't just go to the person in charge and willy-nilly. You have to be invited, and if not, you're going to be here. And this one again, on the historical level, absolutely played out in the Persian Empire, that if you go to the king's presence unsummoned, then you would die. Again, they don't know they don't know you, and so there's a very real thing that they're using here. But they're using this aspect here to change Esther, because she has to take her life into her own hands, and to be willing to risk death to be able to do this. She's the Messiah. She doesn't she doesn't die, but she risks death by doing it. And I think that's what matters here.
The willingness.
Mm-hmm. Because just like in these sacrificial people, it's not the fact that it's with martyrs, it's their willingness to put that the fact that they might die is secondary. Their call is to do what they have been their job is to do what they've been called to do. And so
even unto death,
exactly. And in fact, that's the last thing she says in this chapter. She says, okay, and if I perish, I perish. But it wouldn't be an exciting story if she said, okay, well, I'll go ask him tomorrow. If there wasn't that rule, it'd be almost a boring story. And they're doing, and the retelling of this story is, they stretch time, add things to get you to pay attention, so that you'll then be able to learn all the deeper lessons. And so he goes in and throws that complication, this that historical fact that if someone goes in before the king, then they're risking death. And so and then let's see if I want to go there yet. Oh, and notice here again, I told you they were the intermediary was going there. But all of a sudden, even though they're still talking to through Hathach, it changes. The author pulls him out of the story to suck the reader in, such that now he's removed that wait time. He said now, when the story is most crucial here, you're getting it firsthand. All of a sudden, it'd be as if the author starts to remove, this person said this. It's just the words, and who's talking, so you can get sucked into it. It really is just on a literary level. This is just a really fun work. Then they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." So there's a lot going on in that. So it could be that he's like, they're gonna find out if if you stay back in your palace and pretend to be a Persian, they'll know. Someone will eventually come get you. They'll get you. And so then you and your father's house will perish. But it's also there's that option here that we can read in God here, because there's a lot of scholarly debate about what this other place is. Does it mean that if you don't do it, then God's going to step in and do it? Or does it mean that if you don't do it, then someone else is going to do it in your stead? And so and then he, yeah, pause there for a second.
Well, it seems to me that it's kind of like a bedtime.
Mm-hmm.
You can either be willing to honor your bedtime or not, but you're going to bed anyway.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If you don't go to bed, then you're going to have to pay the repercussions of it.
Yeah.
But you're now going to get in trouble.
But you're still going to bed.
Exactly. But you're still going to bed. So it's essentially, you can say that somehow God is going to redeem his people.
Yeah.
So why not have it be you?
And be a
Since
willing.
yeah, since God has put you in this place. I think this is almost what the entire book kind of hinges on here. And the as he's getting you sucked in, all of a sudden you're there watching it, and then he turns to you and said, why not you? He one of the things that Father Bear was talking about a couple of years ago when I went up to Nashotah House is he was saying that unless one has an encounter with Christ in the sermon, then the gospel hasn't been heard, even if it's just been read.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, it's very powerful.
That is powerful.
And so essentially here, the same thing. All of a sudden, every bit of everything fades away here, and I think the author then speaks to the reader directly, and says, "If not, it takes someone who is willing to do the work of God, and has the ability. God put you here for a reason, as long as you are willing to do it. God chose Mary to do it. She had all the things going, but had she said no, it would have been an entirely different story. God.
Well, the message there to me is the message
Go
there
ahead.
to me is that, I lost my train of thought, but the you can either acknowledge you're called to do this or not, but you're called.
Yeah, well, I would say God is calling someone to do this. Why not you?
Why not you? Yeah.
You are placed to do this. Like with Deacon Mike or someone. Someone's gonna do this. Someone's gonna be the deacon of the church. Like Mike to Dave. Someone's gonna be a deacon here.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be you, because think about it. You put all the pieces together. Is he calling you? Because he's calling someone. Why not you?
Well, I think the transitional thought there would be, to get to that place would be, it's not whether I think I'm qualified, but that God has called me and he will equip me.
Right. Well, yes, but even further, you could say all of your life has led up to this. So he's absolutely qualified you. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
One of the things this book wrestles with is whether or not this is in the providence of God or the choice of people. And so here it's saying it's both. God placed her there through these extraordinary circumstances. She's out of 127 people, she's the one that chosen, and she's actually right now a person perfectly placed should she so choose, ugh, to be able to help the people.
Well, and having said wrestle, there in the women's Bible study world, there's an author named Lisa Turkhurst, and she does speak a great deal and teach a great deal on wrestling well before God.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to do.
Right. And
You can either wrestle defiantly, or you can wrestle well, trying to get to where he's waiting on you to get.
oh, right, exactly. And so he's just Mordecai, and the author here is, I think, getting the reader and Esther to realize that God's led you through this through your entire life to this point, and he's calling you to now openly reveal, openly acknowledge his plan. Essentially, it's like, oh, well, okay. And that's exactly, he puts this to her. And now all of a sudden, Esther says, okay. And that's when this is kind of the hinge of everything, because now all of a sudden she says, okay, well, how about do this then? Have everyone, all the Jews in Susa, hold a fast on my behalf and do not eat or drink for 3 days, day or night. And I and my young women will also do so. And then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, then I perish. And so now she's taken that task on her own. She's no longer the beauty queen who won because she was the most beautiful in the land. Now she's taking it upon her. She's okay. Well, since I'm in this place, I can do it better than everyone. You know, God's will is still going to get done, but it can work through me. Like your box lit up. You got anything?
Just when you're talking about being cold and all that and stuff, and I was thinking of how kind of different it kind of worked out, but being trained as a soldier really prepared me for doing the things that I do as a deacon.
Right.
So it's really, really strange how that all fits together, because one's used for very different things. So, but it just really kind of stick with me and stuff about that. And then you're talking about Dave, and David told me that seeing me do the things and watching me go through it is kind of what got him thinking about it. So, so that means that, you know, I was being an example, even though I was just trying to serve. So
Exactly.
I am very pleased that he decided to, you know, pursue it, because I think he'd be very good. And it would be a shame for somebody with his talent not to step up and serve. So.
Right, exactly. Well, or to never be asked.
Yeah.
Yeah, to never have that choice put before them. Because, you know, especially as you know, with the call to ministry, most people don't think about it until they do. You know, until it's put to them, they're like, "Oh, well, actually, I can work back." Yeah, I mean, I could see it work.
Yeah. Dave said that he turned around, he just kind of jokingly said something to his kids. They're like, you know, I could see that. So,
Yeah, see, exactly.
yeah.
So his entire life had been leading up to that point, and now you know, is on the precipice of, you know, becoming that deacon, because someone asked him a question, gave him the opportunity to say yay or nay.
Yeah.
You
We
know?
refer to that as a pivotal moment.
Exactly. and this is Esther's pivotal moment, because she gets to choose to be God's handmaid here. It's and actually one of the things here you can also see is in the play between Moses. You know, Moses was placed in a uh, in royalty. You know, from the exact thing. You know, this tracks along very well. Wasn't royalty, was a Jew. All of a sudden, had it sprung upon him, and because of a death, we don't have to. It doesn't have to be a one for one, but here it is again. And then now she's offered this thing just like Moses was, and she's like, but, and she starts to give a list of buts. She's like, well, I can't do that because I'll die. You know, I can't do that because I can't talk. I can't do that because of this or this or this. But then we see them take it on and say, okay, well, I'll do that then. And so I think we're meant to see this because it's the deliverance of a people. So we can see Moses in Esther, and so we can even and we don't even have to squint that hard to see it.
I've been having issues with people telling me that I am preventing them from coming back to church and all that because I'm not wearing a mask. And I was like, you know what? I said, you need people in the rear, the garrison. So you need people that are cooped up kind of, but they got to give support like we're doing with the video stuff and everything. So you're not a direct contact, but then you need the people that are beyond the front lines, like the doctors and everything, treating the people that have been affected. But then you need the people that are in between, providing the support back and forth, and you can't do that without exposing like the truck drivers and stuff like that, and you know, clergy that's actually, you know, hosting live events as opposed to just by video.
Right.
And so I said, look, I said, I am what I am. I mean, I can't serve if I'm not doing what I feel called to do, and I don't feel called to be cooped up in the house away from everything. I mean,
right.
I know the risks, I know what I'm supposed to be doing, and I have the faith to do that. And they said, well, does that mean that if I wear a mask that I'm not showing faith in God? I said, no. I said, this is what I am called to do. That is what you feel called to do. I said, it has nothing to do with each other. It's just I can't sit there and not serve. It's just it's ingrained in me. So.
Well, it's called boldly stepping out on your faith. And, you know, and yes, wearing a mask in some circumstances is absolutely appropriate.
Yes.
But in watching all of the services of the different parishes, that they're going to take their mask off to read anyway.
Right.
Now, I know that at St. Vincent's, when they're administering the host, I do believe they put them back on because it is close proximity. Because they have their earlier service, they're encouraging the senior population to go to the earlier service and the younger population to go to the latter service. It's just a guideline. It's not a have to, but it is it's appropriate.
Right.
And so I told Mother, I guess that puts us in the same category.
Yeah. But that's what I see with Esther. There's she having to step out, and Mordecai also, you know, having to step out and just stick their neck out. And that's kind of what I do. But, you know, obviously it's not as dangerous as it was, you know, like losing my head. I mean, I might get infected on it, but I mean, honestly, survival rate is a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. So
yeah, so it's I mean, it's about managing risk. And you know, low risk priorities. You know, and some things you use a mask so that you can continue to do the ministry, and it's essentially, you know, I'm fine, so but in case I'm not, you know, but you're trying to allow do the ministry as safe as possible for as long as possible. And so it's like, well, if I get it, then I get it. I'm fine with it. But that means that, I'm already understanding of those consequences.
Yeah, it's like Francis went out with the lepers. Jesus went out with the lepers.
Right.
It's like, they know that there's a risk. I mean, obviously Jesus can, heal himself and all that.
Right.
But
Yes, but you also have to consider your family that
Right,
you go home
exactly.
to.
yes,
And
yes.
that's why you have to be, what was the term you used? You have to, make the decision to be mindful of it.
Exactly.
Right. If now my granddaughters were still here, I'd be a lot more cautious. But
right.
But and Angela, she has ailments, but they're not like autoimmune type stuff. So I mean,
Like
they're
I
like
have.
right. So it's like physical ailments. And mine are mostly physical ailments. I do have some like respiratory issues and all that, but it's like I went and had my foot looked out on Monday, but I was wearing my mask in the doctor's office and my O2 levels dropped because, so I was like, I can't do this. They're like, okay, go ahead and take it off. But I normally, most people, they're like 98 to 100% on their oxygen without any aid and stuff like that. I'm usually about 95, 97, somewhere around there, but I dropped down to about 90. And once you get past about 88, they start rushing you the ER and throwing oxygen on it. It's like, yeah, I can't wear a mask. If I do, I mean, I can wear it for a short amount of time, but you start getting that carbon monoxide buildup, and repeatedly breathing, your exhaled air. So the quality gets poorer and poorer. So I can wear it, but I have to take it off after so much time. And the thing of it is, once you lift that mask off, you've already exposed yourself. So,
right. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So.
It's just limiting those risks and being, again, as safe as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Well, when I go inspect a house, I put my mask on, I put my gloves on, I do my job. When I go back outside, I take it off, I take the gloves off, throw them away, and I use my hand sanitizer.
Right.
So I'm good. And I do have an autoimmune disease. Yeah. So it's just taking the precautions and still living my life.
Mm-hmm. Now, and then the last part of here, and he says, and she says, then I will go to the king, though it's against the law, and if I perish, I perish. You get here. Yeah. And you can also see in here a bit of an echo toward Jacob when he lets his son's goat, or what, he lets his sons take Benjamin go and say, if I'm bereaved, then I'm bereaved. At some point you have to let go and say, okay, I'm giving them up to God, and giving my life, giving this, Jacob gave his son, but it's like, it's serving a greater purpose at that point. And so it's like, if it happens, it happens, but I'm going to trust in God, which is what she's saying here. Though, again, it's like the author went in and meticulously took out all the references to God. And it's interesting that, and so there's the Greek text is also the alpha text is what it's called, when they're kind of combined and so what you do is you get they add back in, if you neglect your people, God will be there. So it adds God back into that, and it kind of takes all the mystery out of it and makes it it kind of dumbs down the message here. Because if you look at it as it is in our Bibles, that it's there, it's addressing the issue of what do I do? How do I follow God's will when I can't see it actively? And then so the later text is going back in and saying, okay, well, here's all the parts where that was taken out, and so it puts it back in, but that's only in hindsight, essentially. And so it makes it, I don't know. Normally I'm in favor of the Septuagint text, but not so much here.
So that's really kind of how all of our lives go. Sometimes events happen, and we're not really thinking in terms of like little things, thinking in terms of, oh, that was God, oh, that was God. But then when they all add up and you come to that quote pivotal moment, you go, oh, that was you, God.
Right, exactly. And no, exactly. Because you can look back, you can't see it in the moment, and so the Hebrew text is like we're living through it that first moment, and then the Septuagint is like looking back and saying, oh, here's the connection here, I get it.
Yes.
Yeah. And then verse 17, it says, then Mordecai went away and did everything that Esther had ordered him. So you have a switch here, switching roles. Whereas at the beginning, Esther's doing everything that Mordecai says. Now it switches because Mordecai is doing everything that Esther's saying. And we can think about all the implications of that in the greater narrative. Like so if so let's see here. So and I'm just kind of spitballing here. So if Mordecai is God, and then Esther's us, or the people, all of a sudden when God has given us the authority to do a thing, and we've accepted that authority, it's okay. Well, now I'm going to do what you say, essentially. Never fully giving up control, but allowing us to have that the authority to do those things. So then he follows through and does what we say. I think that's right.
Well, it leads me back to that phrase, equipping the saints
Yeah.
to do what he's guiding us to do.
And then making it happen.
And then making it happen.
Exactly.
Laying the groundwork.
Mike, did you have something?
No, it's just picking my mic up, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, that gets us to the end of chapter 4. So let's go ahead
and the goats are hungry.
And there, exactly. All right. Well, let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Blessing God Almighty, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit be upon you and remain with you always. Amen.